Welcome everyone to Armbar, the Valley's only home for pro wrestling and MMA radio talk here in the Rio Grande Valley. I, of course, am the rock star, Jay Ochoa, and over in the corner, of course, is the awesome one, the Biz, Mike Balsadua, and today we got a special guest here in the studio. You may remember him from his time in NXT from 2015 to 2016, but also you may have seen him on CBS Sports, calling basketball games, as well as ultimately a familiar voice here in the Valley. You may remember him as Alex Reyes. In studio, Mr. Alex Del Barrio. Alex, welcome today to Armbar.
I'm glad to be here, man. It's been a long time coming. Mike's been trying to get me in to whatever studio we have at the time, to do a show. And my travels, I feel like I've been big timing you guys for a while, and I feel like now my travel schedule's kind of lightened because of a little virus that's going around. I've got a little bit of extra time on my hands, so thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. It's nice to see that the pro wrestling scene in the Valley is still going strong. There's a lot of great wrestling fans down here, have been for so many years. Me being one of them, obviously. Glad to be here, man.
Welcome, of course, Alex, and of course we do thank you for also being here, especially with what's going on in the news, of course, with the recent outbreak. Of course, we encourage all of our fans, all of our viewers to stay safe, just wash your hands, and just ultimately just stay safe, everyone, and especially with today's recent outreach. I mean, a lot of major shows have had to be canceled, including last night's Ring of Honor Anniversary pay-per-view, which I was looking forward to, but ultimately the safety of the fans and the safety of the public is what matters most, and we hope that this eventually gets settled to where it's no longer something that's, hopefully I'm saying this word correctly, guys, correct me if I missay it, pandemic?
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, Alex, you mentioned, of course, you are one of the many wrestling fans, one of the many people that got into wrestling. What attracted you to the world of professional wrestling? How did it all start?
So I could go back. Actually, if people want to Google, if they look up Alex Reyes and type in Alex Reyes WWE.com, Byron and I did an interview kind of thing, and we talked about I can tell you, I can pinpoint the moment where I first started watching wrestling. And I don't remember the date, but it was in I want to say it was in May of 1993. When I don't remember the exact date, but it was the episode of Raw where the 1-2-3 Kid beat Razor Ramon, who we have up there, which was kind of fascinating that Razor Ramon was up there. It was the night with the upset, and it was like the whole concept of anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation, because Vince McMahon was on the on the mic at the time for Raw, and I think that same episode of Raw was the confrontation between Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, who at the time I had no clue that they had been tag team partners or any of that previous history. That was my first, and I had known who Hulk Hogan was and Sting and Ric Flair. I knew who these people were, but I didn't watch the shows. I didn't know anything about it. But that's when hey man, I kind of like this, So I started watching every Monday after that, kind of up until the King of the Ring, and Hulk Hogan, loses to Yokozuna, and this kind of new generation. So it's weird that I got into wrestling during the time that it was kind of the downswing of wrestling, when fewer people were watching. But that's when I got into it, and I have there's a collection of friends that I have that we have a group text that that we have now, but this friend group that we all kind of watch wrestling through our junior high and high school days together. I went to my first wrestling event was actually a WCW show. It was the Fall Brawl '93 at the Astro Arena. So I saw there was War Games, and it was Ric Flair versus Rick Rude. It was the first time I saw Lord Steven Regal at the time. I saw Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and just it's just fascinating to me, this whole production and this, and to me, I guess you could say I thought it was real, at the time, this competition. But that's kind of how it all started for me, and it's kind of, escalated from there. And then when I knew I wanted to be a sportscaster, an announcer, I always man, what if I was Howard Finkel one day? Or what if I was Justin Roberts? To be the guy in the center of the ring with a microphone, just, introducing the wrestlers to the ring and something. And that's something that, 11-year-old me, 12-year-old me is thought was kind of a pipe dream at the time, but always something that was kind of stuck in the back of my head. And I've been a fan ever since. I've been to 3 WrestleManias, 17, 20, and 30, or technically 4 because I worked one at 32 in Dallas. But that's kind of how it all started, man. May of 1993, Razor Ramon versus 1-2-3 Kid. That was how it all started.
Pretty much where the journey began for the future Alex Reyes, Alex Del Barrio. And like you mentioned, I mean, that was at a time when wrestling was, when Hogan was already on his way out,
Yeah.
Warrior was gone. I mean, it was.
WCW wasn't a thing really.
Yeah.
Like it was, on TBS, WCW Saturday night. They didn't have, prime time, Monday nights.
Right.
That came a little bit later after Hogan got signed. So it was like really like kind of the doldrums of it. But I was a fan of wrestling. I wasn't a fan of one company over the other or any of that stuff. I was like whatever was on, I would watch.
Definitely. And then, of course, later on there would be ECW and then several other different brands where the business would begin to grow, especially during the Attitude Era. How closely would you say you would continue following, especially when after 5 years later in '98 you had the Austin era? The Rock was getting big. ECW was becoming more than just a regional company. It was getting that national publicity.
Like Raw was preempted, so that they had the entire audience that night. So I was excited to watch Nitro because I was a Hogan guy. Like even though he was on his way out of WWE at the time, like Hogan was like that's the thing. Like if you didn't know what pro wrestling was, you knew it was the thing that Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage did because they were transcendent stars. So I was always a Hogan guy. So being able to watch him in WCW on this new show was kind of cool. And I was a guy that, remember when I was getting into it, I was like 11 or 12, so all the kid stuff that kind of WWE was doing at the time, like I got, but as I was getting older, and then that's when the shift of the Attitude Era happened. So it's like, I wasn't one of those people that kind of fell out of love with wrestling. It's funny, like you get made fun of in like elementary and junior high for watching wrestling. Then wrestling got cool, and then all of a sudden people are wearing DX shirts and Austin 316 shirts to school. Like, hey man, you used to make fun of me for wearing my Undertaker shirt. Now you're wearing an Austin shirt. What's going on? But yeah, I mean, so I went through the whole like wrestling is popular now, and so like I was just someone that couldn't get enough of it all the way through high school, even in college. Like I had to find like a select group of friends in college that liked the wrestling so that we could all hang out. Because I went to school in Massachusetts, so it was tough making friends to begin with, and you got to make friends who also like wrestling. And I ended up finding a crew of people that like wanted to go watch the pay-per-views. They used to have these like blast areas, I think there was a place here called Fanatics that did them, but in Boston there was a place called Jillian's, which was way outside of the edge of town. It's right where it's in Malden, which is actually where Killer Kowalski had his school.
Oh.
But it was this big entertainment it was almost like the poor man's Dave and Buster's. Like they had video games and ping pong tables and pool tables and this giant bar, and they'd always have these big, huge watch parties for WrestleMania or any of the pay-per-views. So that's when I started like really watching regularly. My parents didn't pay for pay-per-views. I'd watch them when they came out on VHS, and I'd go to the Blockbuster and rent those, put those in.
Classic.
But I was also one of those people too, and I know this is a long-winded answer, but when I got into it, I wanted to know the history, right? So I would go, and I'm from Mission originally. There's a couple of video stores. There was a Video Plus. It was always a little more expensive. There's another place called like Hollywood Video.
Yeah. What are you talking about? What's Video Plus?
Video Plus, Hollywood Video. These are video stores, folks. This is where you could actually you couldn't download anything. They weren't streaming. You actually had to put a physical device inside a player, and it would play it. And you'd actually get in trouble if you didn't rewind it when you took it back.
Thank you for clarifying. Those for the kids.
All you kids out there. Yeah.
This was not Netflix or
This
Hulu.
was not Netflix, not Hulu, not the WWE Network.
Yep.
Man, you know how much I would, if I was a kid today, how much I would, getting into wrestling the way I got into wrestling, would never leave the couch if I had the WWE Network. Because we'd go to the video stores and I would get every Royal Rumble and every WrestleMania, and I tried to do it like chronologically. So okay, Royal Rumble's first. Okay, I'm gonna get Royal Rumble 89 or 90 or whatever, and then try to get the corresponding WrestleMania and SummerSlam so I could watch them through, so I could get the storylines. And it was actually so much easier to catch up in those days because there were only 4 pay-per-views. Yeah. So anything that you needed to know storyline wise in the history of the company, if you just watched the pay-per-views, because they always did a good job of recapping, you would get. But I watched, Starcades and Super Brawls and WrestleManias and SummerSlams, like anything that was at the video store that was there, and all the wrestling tapes were 99 cents. So my mom had no problem renting those for me. And that's how I caught up with the history. And I became a fiend. I became someone that was so obsessed with the history of the business and someone that wanted to understand it. I would get the Apter mags whenever I could find them on the shelves here. I wasn't a tape trader. I didn't understand that was a thing until like I got to college, and by that time you didn't really need to do it. So I wasn't exposed to like ECW. I wasn't exposed to New Japan or any of that stuff until kind of way later in my life. But in terms of the two big companies, like I was as obsessed can be. I had the hard plastic, not the LJN figures, but I guess they were the Hasbro figures.
Oh, yeah.
I had a bunch of those because there were a bunch of toy stores that were like going out of closing, like 50% off sales, liquidation sales, and so I had a couple of the rings and all that stuff, and I would do my matches. Yeah, man, I couldn't get enough of it. Kind of growing up.
It was not a bad thing to have too much of wrestling, because too much of wrestling is just a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, though, of course, you went from, like you said, fan to, of course, I'm sure you had witnessed the fateful date, March 26, 2001, the day WWE had bought out WCW. This is weeks after ECW. Did a part of me kind of think, like, now your wrestling options have kind of lessened? I mean, what went through your mind the day the sale took?
Well, I was a senior in high school, and around 2000, maybe even 99. Because there was
before the Russo era, or?
Right before kind of the Russo era. I want to say, like, because there was a time in there where like I was really busy with school, and I would try to keep up with Raw as much as I could. But I wouldn't say I fell out of love, but there was definitely a gap in my viewing, and certainly like even for both companies. But WCW had kind of like, they changed their logo into that stupid looking Star Trek logo that they had at the end.
Yeah,
and they had Thunder, and I'm like, oh my God, there's this, at the time, I'm like, that's 4 hours on Mondays alone, and you want me to watch another 2 hours on Thursdays? And like, I wanted to watch Seinfeld. I wanted to watch, like, there are other things that I wanted to watch, and I had, I played basketball in high school, and I was involved in a bunch of other different things extracurricular wise. So it's like, there was just an abundance of things for me. So I kind of got re-kickstarted into it as the sale was happening. And, yeah, man, like it was just a weird time to think that like here was this company, this is a multi-billion-dollar company, but you kind of could see the writing on the wall. Once AOL bought Time Warner, and that whole thing kind of went down. But it was going to be weird in seeing, well, where's Rey Mysterio going to wrestle now? Where's Eddie Guerrero? Or Eddie Guerrero's already gone by then. But where are some of these guys that are currently wrestling in WCW? Where are they going to go?
Especially the bigger name talents that didn't show up in WWE until
right
after the Invasion angle.
Like the Nashes of the world and all that stuff. And you always wondered, is Hogan going to go back? Like, is he going to make an appearance at WrestleMania? Like, we were all asking these questions. Like, 17-year-old me and my 16-year-old friend that went to the show together. We're like, you think Hogan's going to show up? You think Nash is going to? Like, he just bought the company. Like, we had no idea. And then when, like, Shane points to the rafters and you're like, oh, my God, those are the WCW. We're like, oh, is that? Oh, I can't. No, I don't know who that is. I can't. You couldn't tell who they were, right?
I recognize you more.
You may recognize you more, but like they were so far away from where we were sitting, like we couldn't. We were just like, yeah, WCW guys. Why are we rooting for WCW guys? I don't know, but it's cool.
Just happy to see something.
Happy to see something. And I thought the storyline, the way they did it, was brilliant. And having Shane come out and say he bought the company, I thought it was really well done to that point. And then obviously we saw what happened after that. But yeah, it was just one of those weird times where we were like kind of uncertain on what the future of wrestling was going to be, especially in terms of the amount of like good wrestling. But there was also like, I was also a big internet guy at the time. I check out message boards and all that stuff. Not as much as there is now, right? The Reddits of the world and the Twitter obviously. But you get on a message board or you go on a website and you see that like, okay, like Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan and Macho Man are trying to start the XWF, right?
Yeah,
and the XWF kind of was starting. It's like, oh, is this going to be a thing? And Hogan's going to start his own company, and like, are they going to compete and whatever? And then so you start hearing all these rumors about like other companies like, popping up, So I was always kind of under the impression that like the wrestling's in a good spot. WWE knows what it's doing, whatever. And but it was as a fan at the time, certainly a weird time in the business because this company that you kind of like equally watched is all of a sudden just like gone after being the biggest thing in the world, like just 3 years prior, Definitely.
It was to go from being the competition to Vince now being in Vince's vault was what a change in 5 years, especially from 1996 to 2001. And to me, it didn't really set in when WCW was gone. It didn't set in when Shane bought, or when Vince bought the company, but Shane was appearing on Nitro. That didn't set in for me. It didn't even set in for me at WrestleMania when Shane pointed up to the wrestlers they brought in from WCW. It really set in when at 7 p.m., because this is when Raw was at 8 p.m. at the time, we were 2 hours. It didn't set in for me until 7 when I tuned into TNT expecting Nitro, but instead I'm watching this old cowboy movie. And that's when I realized, wow, this really is
it's over.
A turning point. This is it's over with.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I go from watching Nitro at 7 to kick off my wrestling night on Monday to now, well, I guess I'm going to have to wait another hour at 8 o'clock for Raw.
Yeah.
And it was like that for a very long time.
Yeah.
At the same time, you went from being, as you said, an obsessed fan to eventually you get into the wrestling business.
Yeah.
How did that all come about? How did you eventually, or when was the turning point when you said, you know what, I want to be that next Howard Finkel or Justin Roberts?
So I never kind of had an opportunity here. There were a couple of, I don't know if you guys, former president of the NWA, Bruce Tharp, and I know a lot of folks have their opinions about Bruce, and I get that. But Bruce was kind of, along with a guy named Carmine DeSpirito, who is now the executive producer of Championship Wrestling of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Along with Dave Marquez, they were kind of like my entryway into the wrestling business. And the way it happened was, I'd already gone through college. I was working for the Fox affiliate here as the sports anchor here in the Valley in McAllen. And they were putting on a show at the Edinburgh Baseball Stadium, which is now UTRGV's baseball stadium. And they were putting on a show, and it was going to be the homecoming of Tito Santana. Tito Santana was from my hometown in Mission, Texas, going to Mission High School, Merced Solis. And they called me and said, hey, do you want to interview Tito? And I said, absolutely. Like, are you kidding me? And Bruce and I had known each other a couple of times through the years. He used to produce a show called the IWF, which was done out of Brownsville. He's all, an attorney in town, and we went. Me and a buddy of mine went to go visit him one time to see how can we be involved, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We just went and kind of visited with the guy. We actually went to the TV station with him in Mexico to see him like edit the show and all that stuff, and it was one of those shows. It's like he obviously did his best, but he didn't have the production team that you needed to put on a good quality show. Every single week of the Rio Grande Valley. But he was finally starting to get people that bought into his vision, and which was like with Carmine, who used to run shows out in the Milwaukee and the Midwest area. He's actually kind of a guy that broke in CM Punk and a lot of those guys in the Milwaukee area. He probably booked Colt Cabana a million times before Colt Cabana was anything. And so he had moved down to the Valley to live at South Padre Island, and he was going to book shows for Bruce. And that we kind of met that way, and I was like, guys, if there's any show that you could put me on as a ring announcer for, or any commentary, whatever, I'd like to be involved. Do you want the long answer? Do you really want the long answer? How this works?
It's your interview, buddy.
All right, man. So, anyways, there was a show that we did in Brownsville. It was at the. I guess it's the Valle Vista Mall in Harlingen.
I believe so. Yeah.
All right. So there was a Circuit City, which I think is now a Gold's Gym or a Planet Fitness or one of those. Yeah. It was an abandoned Circuit City at the time, which is ironic because I worked at Circuit City in college. Nice. So it was an abandoned Circuit City, and they were just using it for kind of event space or whatever. So we did a show. It was Blue Demon, who was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion at the time, wrestling a local product by the name of Golden King. And Golden King used to wrestle on Bruce's IWF show and wrestle on a bunch of the lucha circuits down here. Yeah. And it was a great show. I think X-Pac was on the show. I forget who else we had booked on that show. A lot of local wrestlers from Texas were on that show. And that was the first time I got to ring announce. And actually, at that show, Rich Brennan, his real name was Rich Wilkini, he was the voice of the Rio Grande Valley Killer Bees here locally. Rich Brennan, who had also been one of my wrestling buddies during the time that he was working here at the Killer Bees, he was the timekeeper for that show while I was ring announcing. And that was both of our first nights working in the wrestling business. He was ringing the bell and I was ring announcing. I think we did one other show kind of in Brownsville during Chato days and things like that. But eventually my career started to take off. I worked for the Harlem Globetrotters for a couple of years, and then The real kind of kickstart into the business, I was announcing with the Globetrotters, traveling all over the world with them. I see a tweet from Booker T's account that says, "Hey, we're looking for new announcers for the reality of wrestling." And at the time, it was just a YouTube show. They did it out of a small, community center gymnasium in Clear Lake, Texas. Well, my aunt lives in Clear Lake, Texas, and I'm in Houston all the time. So I'm thinking, man, this might be an opportunity for me to meet some WWE guys down the road, and with my experience at that time, I'd been TV and radio for a long time. I worked for the Globetrotters, which is a global brand. Maybe this is something that, can help me get started if I ever want to go to WWE or Ring of Honor or whatever. So I end up reaching out with them. I email them back and forth. Like, hey, we're going to do an audition here at Booker's office, whatever. So I go and I interview with Booker, Brad Gilmore, who's Brad is Booker's basically right-hand man now. Yeah. He hosts his radio show, does a phenomenal job. Just wrote I do want to give a plug for that. Brad Gilmore's is a big Back to the Future fan and has a new Back to the Future book on Amazon. So just search for Brad Gilmore. I don't remember the title of the book right away, but just look for Brad Gilmore Back to the Future if you're into Back to the Future, because he is a phenomenal talent, both writer, he's a musician, he just does a lot of cool stuff. Well, he hosts Booker's show. It's him and me sitting in Booker's office. They put up an episode of reality wrestling, and by that point, I had watched 15 episodes of reality wrestling, so that I knew who all the talent was. I knew their stories. I knew where that match was in the the confines of the show storyline, story arcs. So I was ready. And I did the commentary. He did color, and then we switched spots, and I did color, and he did play-by-play. And after that, they're like, "Hey man, do you want to come and be on commentary with us?" I'm like, "Absolutely." They made Brad the ring announcer, which is actually what I wanted to do. I didn't want it because I was doing the whole Harlem Globetrotters announcing thing. I was an in-arena announcer. It was more of a live event circumstance. So I thought if I became the ring announcer, I'd be better off getting to WWE that way, because I didn't have a lot of television work at the time, But anyways, I became a play-by-play guy, and I did it for 4 shows. And at the time, they only did 1 show a month, and we taped 4 episodes. So I did it for 3 months, I believe, and then we did a pay-per-view in December, which is kind of 1 episode that we actually ended up spacing out because the iPay-per-view thing was not working out for us. And then I told Booker at the time, I said, "Hey, I'm going back on tour with the Globetrotters. I'm going to have to take a hiatus for a little while." And they understood, whatever, because can you help us out? Find a play-by-play guy. I was like, "Yeah, I'll get you a guy who can help you out, in the next few months, but I'll come back in April." So I give Rich a call. Rich was living in Houston. Rich was not doing any play-by-play at the time. He had stopped doing that. He was doing PR for the local regional sports network. It was Comcast Sportsnet at the time. And he comes in, and he actually kind of met Booker through a different avenue as well. And it just so happened that my recommendation and that interaction happened near the same time. So he goes and he starts working for them, and he kills it. He starts learning the business from from going to the school every day. I didn't have time to. I wasn't living in Houston at the time, so I would just literally drive up 6 hours from McAllen to Houston, do the show, and I'd stay an extra day maybe, and then I'd come home. He was living in Houston at the time, and he was able to come to school every other day. He would learn the business. He started helping him out with a new digital with a new website. He started helping him out with how they did their ticketing, and he just learned all aspects of their little business at the time. And it was just a small business at the time, at the school. Well, he kills it, knocks it out of the park. They eventually do another pay-per-view, and that pay-per-view, Cole was in town. Cole was in town, meets Rich. They actually do commentary together. Rich gets a tryout. Rich gets signed, whatever, a few months later. And then I kind of came back to ROW, but I wasn't really kind of doing anything. I had moved to Houston at that point. I was covering the Texans for a radio station up there. I was doing some play-by-play for Rice, but I thought kind of my time was over. Well, then I go visit Rich in 2013. It's 2013. No. Whenever our evolution was, I think that was 2014.
No, that was 2014.
2014. So I go down to visit Rich because he was living in Orlando, was working for NXT. He was a lead commentator at that point, and that was going to be his first lead role doing, he had obviously he had done obviously episodes, but Tom Phillips had already gotten called up to do SmackDown. So that was the first time Rich was going to do a takeover special.
Which was also a very important show because it was also Kevin Owens' debut.
It was Kevin Owens' debut. It was the night that Sami Zayn obviously defeated Neville for the title at the time. Neville, now Pac.
Yeah.
And so it was a really important night for NXT as a brand and as a company. And it was an important night for Rich, obviously. So I wanted to go and I wanted to support him. He was my best friend. I was the best man at his wedding. And it just so happens that in my interactions when I was there, and I was still working for the Trotters at the time, I meet with their live event producing people. And just because I was hanging out, I obviously had a backstage kind of pass and, whatever. And they asked about me, whatever. And we just got to talking. He's like, give me his card and say, hit me an email in a couple months, whatever. So I emailed him a couple months and I said, hey, whatever. I'll be honest, dude. You might you need to clean up a little bit. I had a beard at the time or whatever. I said, yeah, that was just kind of like I was just there to hang out. I wasn't there to kind of scope for a job. We just happened to meet. And he's like, yeah, you might want to get in shape but I think we might have something in a few months. But keep sending me stuff, keep sending me demos. And at the time I was working for a promotion in Houston, NWA Houston, and I was ring announcing for them because after Rich had gotten signed, I took over for him as the ring announcer at that company. So it just turns out, a few months pass, April comes around, and Rich calls me. He's like, hey, Cole's going to call you. And I'm like, what do you mean Cole's going to call me? He's like, hey,
Cole as in Michael.
Cole is in Michael Cole, yeah. He's like, yeah, the live event folks, obviously like you, and they're kind of pushing for you, and they're expanding what they're doing. And Cole wants to talk to you, and they were going to be in Houston for SmackDown.
Right.
So right around mid-April, of 2015, Cole calls me and says, "Hey man, we're going to be in town. Heard a lot about you." And I had written Cole a couple of times through the years, I sent stuff to WWE all the time, And there were times I got calls back, and they're like, "Hey, can you speak Spanish?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. Whatever." But I was always trying. I emailed Justin Roberts a bunch of times, whatever. And finally, Cole calls and is like, "Hey, we're gonna be in town. Do you want to come in?" I'm like, "I want to come." Yeah, I'll be. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there." Okay, perfect. Just come this time. We'll get you tickets to the show. We'll come backstage. You'll meet everybody. Whatever. We can just talk.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. He's like, we were talking. He's like, this is kind of what we're doing now. This is how we're Rich was kind of the entryway into how we're growing our announcers. We stick you in Florida. You do the Florida loops for a while, and eventually, when there's a spot, you'll come up. But that this is kind of how it works. As Rich is kind of moving up, and he's on main event now, and he's doing NXT TV, but he's really needed more on the road. So we need someone back down, to kind of take care of the Florida loops, and NXT is going to start doing some touring of their own, whatever.
Yeah.
So, great. He's like, do you prefer the ring announcing or do you prefer the commentary? It's like, honestly, Cole, I prefer the commentary, but if you need me as a live event host, I've been doing that for a long time at this point. Wherever you guys need me, I'm ready. He's like, cool. Introduced me to Kevin Dunn, introduces me to Hunter, introduces me to just kind of anyone that was in arm's reach for me to meet. And he's like, cool. He's like, we're gonna get with travel, and we're gonna get you come down for a tryout. So tryout happens, I think, mid-May, late May, whatever it was the Saturday after Dusty passed. Because the whole idea was for me to come in for a whole weekend and also come in for a whole week.
Right. I think that may have been in June because Dusty passed away in June.
So then it was June. Okay.
Yeah.
So it must have been like the second week of June.
I believe so. Yeah.
So when I was supposed to come in, I was supposed to go for Dusty's promo class, which would have been on a Tuesday, and then tapings were on a Wednesday, and I'd have flown out on a Thursday. So that's what happened. Dusty passes. I end up coming in, and no one was at the Performance Center because everyone was at Dusty's funeral. And Cole and King were there because Cole and King were doing voiceovers for the video game. So it just became a dinner meeting, and then the next day was a tryout, and it was honestly, it was like a pretty easy fucking bullshit tryout. Can I swear on here?
Yeah.
Am I okay with that, Mike?
Say
All
whatever you want.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's fine.
I mean, the live event producer who had already met at the time and seen my work, he comes in and they hand me a microphone and they're like, all right, do a ring introduction for this guy or whatever. I'm like, the following contest is scheduled for one fall. Introducing first from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, weighing 227 pounds. Chris, whatever. I don't even know who they gave me at the time to say. I was like, okay, so we know you can do that. All right. And then they handed me like a program and a cup or something. It's like, all right, and before the intermissions, you need to sell these to people. Whatever.
Right.
Like, all right, what do you want me to say? It's like, hit these bullet points. Boom. All right, everybody, just make sure as you're on your way to the concession stands, whatever, make sure you check out the brand new WWE program so you can get all your favorite profiles from all your favorite wrestlers, whatever. So it's like, all right. And then they started like pretending to be fans and like going and interviewing fans because they wanted more of a host, role.
Yeah.
They were trying to get away from just the ring announcer. They wanted you to have kind of a fan interaction aspect.
Right.
So they pretended to be fans, and one was an unruly fan and whatever. So I go through this whole kind of rigmarole for about 40 minutes, and then they're like, all right, whatever. That was it. I did not go into the commentary booth. I did, things that Rich did at his trial. I didn't have to interview a superstar. I didn't do any of that. I think maybe I interviewed Dasha, and Dasha was pretending to be like Sami Zayn or something like that. I couldn't tell you, but it happened so quick, and it could have been long. Like, here's the thing: it could have been a longer process. I just don't remember it. All I remember is standing in the middle of a WWE ring at the Performance Center with a microphone that had a WWE mic flag on it, and just like. It's like if my life ended right now, I'd be kind of okay with that.
It's how surreal did that have to feel for you, just being in a WWE ring in general?
Man, here's the thing, man. I'm from Mission, Texas, man. I've gotten a chance to do a lot of amazing things in my life. I've traveled the world with the Globetrotters. I do games on national TV now on CBS. But the number one dream always was to be working for that company. And to be like within an eyelash of being signed was just a surreal kind of experience for me. Especially because I have so much respect for the wrestling business.
Yes.
I told this just before I was released. I had a long conversation with I call him Tensai, but Matt Bloom.
Yes.
I said, man, because I was having a rough time. I wasn't being treated very well by Tom Phillips. I wasn't being treated very well by a lot of the TV folks. But I was treated very well by the coaches and very well by the talent. And I said, Coach, one of the things that I'm really struggling with here is that I came here to be because I love wrestling. I love the wrestling business. And I respect it so much. Didn't come here to be a TV star. I came here because I even said to him, if they had kept me in NXT forever and all I did was the Florida shows, I'd be totally fine with that. I would have gladly never gone on the road to Raw or SmackDown because that's how much I love the wrestling business. But so rewind back to the tryout, just standing in that ring and knowing like what it kind of means to be there was pretty special for me because not everyone gets the chance to stand in that ring and even try out for a job, let alone get signed to a job. So it was pretty special and emotional for me, yeah. But after that, it took actually a few months after that. It took until about September till I finally got a call from Cole and said, "Hey, we're sending you a contract." And then we negotiated through October. They brought me down a couple of times for TV tapings, but also so they could. I mean, they took very good care of me. Like when I was going through this process, like they flew me down twice so that I could look at housing, like apartments and things like that. They were awesome to me during that process. And then I finally signed in October. At the end of October, it was right after the Bayley Sasha. In fact, I signed the week of Bayley and Sasha's takeover match.
The one from the Iron Man match.
The Iron Woman match. Yeah, Takeover Respect. That's right. Yeah. It was right when I signed. And then I started November 16th. It was right after Thanksgiving. So, and then the rest is history.
Gotcha.
Sorry for the long-winded answer, but it took a long time to get from Edinburgh Baseball Stadium and interviewing Tito Santana to signing on the dotted line to be at WWE.
To be at Full Sail University.
At Full Sail, yeah.
But at the same time, though, every journey has a humble beginning. So
Yeah.
I was just glad to get the answer, even if it's, as he said, long-winded. I was just entertained.
Yeah.
But also, a lot of the stuff that you're telling us, it's also very educational. So
It's also like, I want people to understand too, like about what anything your dream is. Like, there's no roadmap to it. Like, I didn't pinpoint a roadmap that I was saying, hey, I'm gonna go work for this, independent promoter to then get a job with the Globetrotters, and that Globetrotting job is gonna get me, because that sports entertainment also is gonna get me a job at WWE. Like, I didn't like those dots don't necessarily connect. They just happen to connect for me, And I got lucky along the way. I was happy to be around friends that succeeded, like Rich. We helped each other out through this whole journey. Because if he doesn't introduce me, if I don't work for Booker, he doesn't end up working for Booker. And if he doesn't get signed, I don't get signed. And there's just so many things that kind of happen serendipitously that like I understand how blessed and lucky I am for what I was able to accomplish and do. I know that my talents and my hard work got me there as well, but none of those things happen just because like I drew up the map to get there. Like, it happens different for everyone, and I'm just so happy that I was able to do it.
just certain circumstances ended up leading to that eventual destination in Orlando with WWE. As you said, you were officially signed as of November of 2015. You talked about your friendship with Rich. Was he one of the first to call you after you were initially signed? Was it like one of the first to say, hey, congratulations, or hey, we're going to be working together?
I mean, we're best friends, man. I was the best man at his wedding, so like we were talking that entire time through the process. It was like I was like, hey, like, what can I expect or whatever, and he kind of told me like, dude, expect anything. They could put you in the booth and do commentary with King for a tryout. They could put you like he just wanted me to be prepared. It's like he's like, that you can do this, so don't be nervous about it, but do expect anything and everything to potentially happen. He's like, after it was all over, he's like, dude, you got the easiest tryout in the world, because like I didn't have to do anything. It was unfortunate for the reasons why, because I was supposed to do my commentary tryout and go to promo class and help with promo class. And they were probably going to end up doing something with me or to me or have me interview the wrestlers. And that promo class was just canceled because Dusty had passed.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, it was kind of a weird process. But yeah, I mean, Rich and Rich Bocchini, who's now the voice of MLW, for the folks that love MLW, and does a phenomenal job. And I really would. And by the way, he's also the best hockey announcer not in the NHL. If you are a hockey general manager or somebody involved in hockey broadcasting, hire Rich Bocchini. He deserves it, and he's so good at it, and it deserves to be on that platform. But yeah, he's one of my best friends. He's one of the guys that helped me through that entire process. But we've always helped each other through this whole thing. And he's a guy that I really rely on and for advice, and kind of vice versa. We're brothers to the end, man.
Awesome, man. Also, you mentioned your time in WWE, which unfortunately was not very long.
Yeah.
Which I feel you should have had maybe a longer opportunity, or perhaps a better opportunity and a longer stint there. But that's out of our hands.
Yeah.
At the same token, you did mention that you were treated well by the coaches like Matt Bloom, or to WWE fans, Prince Albert, A-Train, Tensai, to New Japan fans, Giant Bernard. But you were also, what's up?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea, yes.
Sweet tea.
I missed that gimmick, by the way.
Yeah, he didn't like it when we call him Sweet Tea.
Knowing myself, I probably would not call him that either. But at the same time, there was also, as much as you had the pros, there was also the cons, like you mentioned earlier, with the issues you had. What were some of the things that were going on backstage that both put a smile on your face while you were there at WWE, and those that kind of turned that smile upside down? And it's your interview. You just answer as best to your ability.
So I was only backstage at Big TV only a few times. My tryout or my initial meeting with Cole is what I mean. The Royal Rumble, which was in Orlando. Mm-hmm. The next night's Raw, which is in Miami. And WrestleMania, TakeOver, obviously the numerous TakeOver specials that I was a part of. and I'm trying to think if there was one other big TV that I was at. I don't think so. Most of my stuff was on the Florida Loop, so I went to all all the Florida towns like Palatka and I can't even remember some of the names of the towns at this point, but Orlando. I ring announced Shinsuke Nakamura versus Samoa Joe in front of 210 people in Orlando, Florida Armory. Like, so weird. Like, it's on my demo reel. Like, you're like, what? Shinsuke versus Samoa Joe, which is a main event anywhere else in the world, is main eventing a NXT Florida live event in front of 200 people. And I'm in the ring announcer. I even said that. Drake was the referee, and I was standing next to him in the corner as Nakamura was coming out. And this was right after Nakamura had signed.
Yeah.
I said, dude, look how lucky we are. Like, we're watching a world-class main event matchup in front of 200 people in Orlando, Florida. It was so weird. But those were the things that I loved about it. I love doing those small towns. Like some of the people that still follow me on Twitter, still interact, and a lot of fans still in the Florida Loop that say, "Man, we miss you. We thought you did a great job." Like they're still this one family that always sends me pictures that they find, because there's a lot of those fans that are basically amateur or semi-pro photographers, and they take pictures of every show. And they still find pictures, and they go through their albums, and they say, "Hey, send them to me." It's like, "Hey, we miss you," whatever. And that warms my heart, because it shows that I did a good job and people enjoyed what I was doing. I love to have fun. It resonated, I think, with the fans that I was a fan. I think they kind of, as most kind of hardcore wrestling fans do, they kind of resent people that come from outside the wrestling world or that weren't fans before they kind of joined the company.
Yeah.
I think that's muted a bit now, but it certainly was. It's certainly there's a lot of vocal fans that don't like, whether it's a play-by-play guy or a ring announcer or a live event host that has no idea what wrestling is or never watched it as a kid, and they tend not to like those people. They could tell I was a fan. They could tell how much I enjoyed my job. So that was fun. I enjoyed going to promo class and working with talent on backstage interviews and other different things, because it is what they say it is. It is a training ground, and a lot of these people have never been in front of a camera before, and they have to learn on where to look and how to stand and the correct posture and where the camera is and where not to look at the camera and when to look at the camera if they ever want you to do, because that policy changes every 5 minutes depending on whatever Vince wants.
Yeah.
We'll get a memo and don't look at the cameras, and then it's why aren't they looking at the cameras? Okay, Vince, whatever.
And he's going to always change things sometimes on the drop of a hat.
Yeah, on the drop of a hat, or a guy's name will change, or any of that stuff. But I always enjoyed going to promo class, and especially with the young, freshly signed talent, because they're just trying to get their bearings of the place, And we talked about relationships with the coaches, so Adam Pierce, who was there at the time, Scrap and I worked together a ton when he would come down for Brownsville shows as the NWA World Champion.
Yeah.
So Scraps and I knew each other for a long, long time before I ever got signed, and he was such a great resource for me to kind of navigate the hardships of it. And he tried to do his best to try to help shield me from a lot of shit, but he could only do so much. And I wasn't expecting someone to shield me. I was expecting someone to kind of just kind of guide me, along the way. Because as much as I'd been involved with the wrestling business, it's not like I was a wrestler. I didn't make towns or any of that stuff kind of coming. I did the local shows, and that was about it. But Robbie Brookside is one of my dearest friends. The day I got released, he made me come over to the house, and we just sat there and boozed it up and just enjoyed, shared stories. And I'll never be able to repay Robbie for making me feel better about myself and about my career by inviting me to his house that day, and I'll forever be grateful for that. I'd go to shows with Terry Taylor. Terry Taylor taught me so much about story and the heel's job in a match, the babyface's role in a match, what a good cutoff is, and what, how to identify these things while you're calling a match. I got a master's degree in pro wrestling psychology just by writing to towns with Terry Taylor.
One of the all-time greats.
One of the all-time greats, and one of the smart. And I know he gets a lot of flack on certain podcasts, but I will always value my time with Terry Taylor, because if it wasn't for him and his kindness, and his honesty, he was brutally honest about a lot of stuff with me. I wouldn't have been able to navigate the 7 months that I did get while I was there. So him and Robbie and Adam were three of the best people to me while I was there. Norman Smiley, in a similar vein, tried to calm me down whenever I was right about something and Phillips was wrong about something, and I wanted to correct him. He would try to tell me to pick my battles and things like that. Because I'm one of those people that if you're wrong, I'm going to show you why you're wrong. And I'm not doing it to make fun of you, or I'm not doing it to belittle you. I'm doing it because I want to correct you, and I want it to be correct. And I want us to be on the same page. And there were times where, I'll give you a story. And Phillips, if you ever watch this, you remember this story, all right? So we're doing commentary, and Phillips was, going through. It was, I think, me and Damian Sandow was down, and we were doing a match in the Performance Center booth.
Okay.
And
this was like a practice?
This was like a practice, yeah. So one of my jobs was also to download the matches, and the matches were basically the same production of NXT or SmackDown, but they were without the commentary audio, so that we could pop them in, we'd get the crowd audio in our ears, and be able to call the match off of a monitor, right? And they use the same kind of technology when they would have shows overseas, or for some reason the commentators couldn't be there, or if they needed to revoice SmackDown, which Rich had to do a lot, when he was on SmackDown. So it's that same commentary booth there at the PC. I'm not sure if it's still there now. I know they've renovated a couple things, but
yeah.
So I'm there with Damian Sandow and I think one other person or whatever doing commentary, and I say the term "skinning the cat."
I think I heard about that, but.
All right, so I say the term "skinning the cat," and instead of letting us go through the rest of the match, he stops the match. And he's like, "Do not ever say an insider term when you're doing commentary." I said, "I didn't. I said skinning the cat." It's like, "That's an insider term." I'm like, "But Cole has said this. JR has said this."
Yeah. A lot of times for stuff that Shawn Michaels had done when he'd been thrown over the top rope, and whenever he's not thrown over completely, he's holding onto the top rope to just get.
And to let people know, an insider term would be if I said babyface on commentary, if I said heel on commentary, if I said go home, or
even
storyline, or if I said something like something like bladed or a hard way, or all those wrestling terms that you guys have learned. Mark, if I said Mark on the air, those are things that you can't say, and it's in our handbook not to say. And I know not to say. I would never say. I would never say Mark on television.
Yeah.
And he says skinning the cat, which, by the way, do you guys know this? Skinning the cat is a gymnastics term. It comes from the high bar.
Yeah.
And the rings. It's a gymnastics phraseology and that's why when you're describing it and why JR described it, it's the same motion of pulling yourself back up from obviously a hanging position.
Yeah.
Comes from the high bar of men's gymnastics.
Or in the wrestling case, the top rope.
The top rope. So not an insider term.
Yeah.
He stops it. And I said, Phillips, this is not an insider term. He's like, whenever have you ever heard Cole say this? I'm like, I'm almost certain that he said it during the Punk Bryan angle.
Yeah.
Because I remember Bryan doing it in one of the matches. I remember Punk having tried to do it a couple of times. I remember at WrestleMania 25 when Ricky Steamboat did it and JR said it, which wasn't that long ago,
Yeah, exactly.
And so it became
a war of words.
It became kind of heated. He's like, "Don't ever say that again." And I'm like, so then commentary session's over. I'm fuming because I'm like, bro, you're supposed to be my boss teaching me commentary, and you don't even know what an insider term is. You don't even know the etymology of skinning the cat. And so I end up going back to Norman Smiley. I end up I find like 4 instances within the last 3 years in WWE on WWE Network. This is how obsessed I get about proving people right.
Yes.
I find like 3 or 4 separate instances on WWE, and I have them on three or four different tabs on my on my laptop. And Norman's asking me what I'm doing, and I was like, and I tell Norman the story, and he's like, Alex, I know you're right. It's obvious that you're right, but you need to pick your battles. And I was like, I kind of understood. I also kind of wanted to email all 4 of those things to that piece of shit and say, look, this is the 4 times that Cole has said it in the last 3 years. But whatever, but that was just one of the many like kind of little like when people say that they get fired or they get in trouble or they get heat over the dumbest stuff at that company, believe them every single time because it's almost certainly true. Think about the time that Miz got in trouble for so many years because he ate chicken over JBL's bag.
Or a referee's t-shirt, I believe it was.
Or a referee's t-shirt, or...
something along those lines, yeah.
I know a guy who got in trouble for moving somebody's bag in the locker room.
Yeah.
And it didn't actually happen. But he got in trouble for it. Because it made it through 7 different channels at that particular point, and someone gets in trouble for it. I got in trouble because I was in the drive-thru at Whataburger in Jacksonville. Because it wasn't part of my diet. I mean, there's just I could.
Was that something you were told as far as like dietary or just?
We were all given. They can't. Well, we're talent, so I guess they could have gotten away with it. Guidelines for look and appearance. Yeah. They want us to wear certain types of suits and all that stuff, which I totally get. We're on TV. We need to be presentable. And I had lost a bunch of weight. I'm much heavier now than I was when I was at WWE. I think I was at 205 or 206 by the time I got released at WWE, and that was a good 40 pounds lost. I worked really hard to get about 225 when I got signed, and then when I got there, I lost even more weight, and then I started to gain weight because I was putting on a lot of muscle. So I did a really good job of getting lean, and if you look at my pictures now to what I looked like when I was at WWE, just look Alex Reyes. On NXT, you can see the amount of work I put in to be trim. And the whole thing about Jacksonville is there's only, I think, 2 Whataburgers in all of Jacksonville. I'm from Texas, man. You put me near a Whataburger, I gotta go. And when you're on your way home from a show and it's a 2.5-hour ride, I mean, there's not a lot open,
Yeah.
And Phillips just happens to be in the car behind me. And a couple of days later, because we always have Sundays off, so it was either Monday or Tuesday that next week at the Performance Center. Phillips pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, is Whataburger on your diet?" And I'm like,
"What's it to him?"
Well, I'm like, first of all, what's it to you what I put in my body? Second of all, my weight training program is with our guy in the weight room, not with you. He's like, you may be my supervisor here, but you're certainly not my dietitian. And I mean, to be fat shamed in that way, and he'll try to claim now that he was joking about it, but at the same time, he's like, yeah, everything you do is going to be monitored, and people are going to look and make an opinion. I'm like, well, here's the thing, Phillips. I'm hungry, and that's the only thing between here and Orlando that I want to eat before a 2.5-hour ride. I'm going to eat what I want, and especially for being from Texas and only get to eat Whataburger when we go to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I'm going to take advantage.
Yeah.
Especially in the fact was the only reason he found out about it is because he was in the drive-thru behind me. How do I know you didn't eat a Whataburger? Just because you're rail thin, doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs to be rail thin at that company.
Yeah.
So I took great offense to that, and he and I were not on the greatest of terms when I was there. And here's the thing I will say is I think Tom's a great announcer. And I think there are certain people that he treats well there. But I also think he bullies certain people. And I also think there's a lot of that culture at that company. I think some people get it, some people don't. For some reason, people are shielded from it. I think people that are seen as a threat to either their job or their spot, they get it. And, if you can navigate it, then you're going to be there a long time. If you can't navigate it, and I'm much too headstrong and angry, not angry, angry is the wrong word, but I worked really hard to get to all the spots that I've been to because you don't see a lot of English language speaking Hispanics in a lot of these positions that I've been in.
Yeah.
I've had to work really hard to break barriers in that regard. So I'm certainly going to fight for what I think is right and how to be treated. And sometimes it just doesn't work that way. I was times when I was lied to, or I was times where I got in trouble for somebody else doing something. I got in trouble. This was the last straw. I don't even know if you asked this question, but I'm gonna.
Go right ahead.
So
I might come back around too.
Yeah. So the last thing I got in trouble for when I was there, and I think this was this last straw because I didn't get in. I wasn't put on really anything after this point. So I was at WrestleMania. I was supposed to do Access. It was supposed to be myself, Dasha, Greg Hamilton, and Phillips working at Access. And we were going to alternate roles. Some of us were going to ring it out. Some of us were not going to ring it out. Some of us were going to do the interviews in the crowd. Phillips had a lot of other responsibilities because I think he had to do Hall of Fame, so he had to do production meetings for that.
He was also the announcer for the Takeover Dallas that weekend.
He was also announcing for Takeover Dallas that weekend, so he had certain things, and Hamilton was the ring announcer for that show as well. So he had responsibilities and production meetings to be at as well. So it was really just going to be me and Dasha for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Well, we get one schedule before we leave, and I was going to ring announce that Sunday, I was going to ring announce everything at Access because Dasha was already going to be needed on site.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of things and I think I was going to do Saturday right before Takeover because Hamilton and Dasha were already going to be over there. Because Dasha would have ring announced for the TV portion the TV taping portion of Takeover. So then when we fly into Dallas. And we go to the building, the convention center, the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Center, and we go to the set where NXT is, and they do this really good job of making the NXT set at Dallas look like as much like Full Sail as possible. The exception being that the set that they use is the set that they now use at least at the time. All the live events, all the regular house show live events.
Oh, okay.
It's got the LED boards on the side and the entranceway. It was a brand new LED. It was a brand new set. They had just started using it, I think, that year, but it was the same set we were using for everything, right? So I take a selfie with the set behind me.
I think I heard about that, but as you were saying.
So I take a selfie with the set behind me. And nothing of it, I put it out on Twitter. Can't wait to meet all of you WWE Universe at Access. I don't remember what the tweet says, but that's essentially what the tweet was. Being excited, I'm at this huge grin on my face, whatever. So there were two things I got in trouble for. One, Alex, why weren't you shaven when you got on the plane this morning? I said, first of all, I was in a blazer, a dress shirt, and slacks, and dress shoes. Just because I'm a little scruffy. By the way, Phillips, you're scruffy.
No.
Why wasn't I shaven? When Dasha got on the plane, and this is not to take anything away from Dasha. Mm-hmm. Dasha went on the plane in shorts and a tank top and a jacket, and a track jacket.
Yeah.
And other talent get on the plane however they want to. I was in slacks, a blazer, and a dress shirt to go to WrestleMania. Yeah, I was a little scruffy. My flight was 6 in the morning, whatever. I wasn't on TV that day.
Yeah. But you probably would have shaven as soon as you got to the hotel, so we're...
Right. But I would have shaven when I was going to be in front of people. I was at a meeting looking at the set and meeting with our production folks.
Yeah.
That's all I was there for. It's the same thing as if that production meeting was at 6 a.m. and, we're driving to the building, I've been in a bunch of other meetings where I've not been shaven. And it was never a thing that was ever said to me, be clean shaven on the plane. It was literally like a 5 o'clock shadow, you know?
Yeah.
The second thing is, why did you take a picture of the set for access? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like there's going to be a reveal for that. I'm like, there's going to be a reveal for the set at AT&T Stadium. This is the same set we use at live events. It's like, Cole saw the tweet, and I'm like, how would Cole have seen the tweet? Cole doesn't follow me on Twitter. So I'm like, and this is in my head. This is not a verbatim conversation.
Right.
I was like, so I'm thinking in my head, you saw this tweet as an opportunity to send to Cole
The tattletale on you.
to be pissed off at me.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's like, Alex, can you take the tweet down? So I took the tweet down. Then I get a call like an hour later, not from Cole, but from Phillips. Cole is telling you to not tweet or do any type of social media for the remainder of the trip here at WrestleMania. You will not be ring announcing, and you will only be helping access where the production coordinators want you to do it. So because I took a selfie of the set that we always use for live events,
Yeah.
I was now no longer going to ring announce the entire weekend at WrestleMania. So
That'd feel like a stab in the heart, pretty much, you know.
yeah, and here's the thing: like, if you ask the two production guys that I was working with that year, they all had like rave reviews for my work and how hard I was working. There were times where like the talent was unfairly giving Dasha a hard time when she was interviewing them in the ring, and I had to step in like when she didn't, like, for instance, she hadn't known. There was a couple people that like kind of threw at her like at the last minute that she didn't have cards prepared for because she had questions. Josh is very well prepared, so she likes to have her questions ready and all that stuff. And I think they threw a Lunger Blaze at us, and I don't think she had a card for a Lunger Blaze. I could be totally misremembering who the talent were.
It's all good. Hey,
But
story.
I knew all of these talent because it was like Hacksaw Jim Duggan came out once, and I think he was Hacksaw that was the surprise. And then Lunger Blaze came out. The Dudley Boys gave her such a hard time. I felt really bad for the way that they were treating her. And so like I would jump in to try to like salvage the situation, you know, because she was doing such a great job, but the talent was kind of giving her a hard time. But then like Stardust came out and Cody and it made things a little easier. But what the feedback that I was getting is like you and Dasha are working so well together with this back and forth, you know, because you're asking questions, because you're obviously coming from a fan's perspective. She's coming at it from like an interviewer's perspective, and then you're interviewing all of these fans along the way. I did a bunch of cool stuff in the crowd that day. We did a really cool thing where we gave away tickets to TakeOver that night. So I found a father and his son that were there. They didn't have tickets to TakeOver. The kid was so upset that he wasn't going to be able to go. He had a Money in the Bank briefcase, which they just started selling.
Yeah.
So we were interviewing the two of them, whatever, and I had someone else stick the tickets inside his Money in the Bank briefcase. And we did this whole little surprise, like, hey, so can you answer these questions for me, whatever. It was kind of, just a little BS just to kill time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, this can't happen. You need to go see TakeOver. It's like, do me a favor, man. Open up your Money in the Bank briefcase. He opens up the Money in the Bank briefcase. Boom, there are the tickets. And he is just going crazy because he's like shaking because he's getting tickets to TakeOver. The dad still emails me to this day thanking me for how we did that for his son.
That's an awesome move.
I got such great feedback for our work together, Dasha and myself, that weekend. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter how good of a job we did. Because Cole had made up his mind, because Phillips bothered Cole. Cole's got a million things going on that weekend.
Yeah.
And Phillips bothers him with the fact that I wasn't shaven, and the fact that you took a picture.
That
I took a picture next to the NXT set, which isn't a big deal. at all. If I had taken a picture next to the Elimination Chamber, would I have gotten the same thing?
I mean, unless the chamber had been modified, like, hey, we're going to use a new chamber, don't take a picture yet because we're going to reveal that at that time. Okay, that might have been different.
Right, but if you're doing a reveal, things would be dark. Things would not like. It was open and lit, like, and there were concession people, there were like other crew people walking through the halls. Like, it's not like it was a big secret, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas like at WrestleMania, like, it's a big. I mean, it's not really because the people get. We see leaks of the stupid set all the time. But they found something to be mad about, and that was basically the last straw for me. I never got to do an NXT road trip because Phillips put himself on all of those road trips. Then they hired the new girl that came in after me, who's no longer there because she had to deal with a lot of the same stuff that I did.
Which girl was that by chance? Do you remember?
Now you put me on the spot.
Sorry.
She was the girl that
Mike, do you remember?
She worked for she used to work for the Florida Panthers. She another Hispanic girl from Florida was a Miami Dolphins cheerleader. You're putting me on the spot.
That's okay.
Yeah, but if you look up NXT around that.
Yeah, something like that.
She was actually on Raw for a little bit as well. Oh, DeMarco. Something. Her last name was DeMarco. While it was.
To be honest, I don't even remember that time.
She was only there for like 6 months, like 5 months maybe.
Was she a blonde by any
No,
chance?
she was dark hair,
Oh,
Latina.
okay.
Andrea DeMarco, and her
Okay.
real name is Andrea Ocampo. I was in charge of training her, and they put her on the Florida live events, and then I was only going to be doing Florida, and then by the end of it, there was a TV taping where I had 0 backstage interviews, but they still needed me for a Florida loop, and during this whole time they were bringing in Mike Rome. Mike Rome is Greg Hamilton's buddy.
Yeah.
And Mike, who's a really good announcer and loves the business, and so I have nothing against Mike at all, or Austin is his real name, but yeah, he came in for the tryout during that episode of NXT tapings that I didn't have any interviews for.
We eventually got the job, initially starting out doing the Cruiserweight Classic, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. But he was coming in for NXT because the day I was released was the day he walked in the door. And he was given my key fob.
And pretty much you and Rich were both released either the same day or right around the same time, correct?
Rich got released 2 weeks earlier than I did.
Oh. Okay.
Rich, which was 2 weeks earlier than I did, right after WrestleMania. Then Arda got released, or Arda's contract ran out. Arda Cal, who now works for ESPN.
Kyle Phillips at the time.
Kyle Edwards.
I'm Kyle Edwards. I'm sorry.
Kyle Edwards, and because he wasn't a Cole hire, he was a TV office in Stamford hire. Nicest guy in the world, and I think he got treated so unfairly when he was there. Treated me so well, still treats me well to this day. So he got released, and then I was on vacation in Chicago when he got released, and I was by that point I was like, I'm freaking next. I know I'm next. And then the next set of TV tapings coming up the day before those tapings is when I got released.
At the time that you were released, was it more of a relief, like you don't no longer have to deal with the BS you were going through, or did you kind of feel like my dream just got taken away from me unfairly?
The latter, for sure. The latter, for sure, because of how it was happening. Because I'm pretty self-aware of, like, I was not surprised by it because I could see the writing on the wall, and how it got to that point was what was the hurtful thing. Look, I never got a negative review from a coach. I never got a negative review from the talent, like in terms of like no one ever complained about me in those respects. I never got a complaint from a fan about me. The only two people that complained about me were Greg Hamilton and Tom Phillips, who happened to be in charge of me.
What was Hamilton's malfunction, or what was his issues? Because I know the issues with Phillips you mentioned. What about with Hamilton? Is it just because he's Phillips' buddy? Or?
Well, no. And Greg is a great ring announcer, and he does a great job, and he's super well organized. And I don't want to take anything away from either of those guys as in their jobs, because I think Greg has become a really good ring announcer because he comes from a hosting background, so you had to learn how to become an announcer. But Greg's situation with me was that he kind of So there was a thing I was asked to do. One of those things was the pre-show for our live events, our NXT live events. Dasha had done a thing called like it was like who am I? It was called a Who Am I game. It's like just kind of a game to play with the fans, kind of warm up the crowd type of thing.
I think I've seen that at a few house shows.
Yeah, and they use the video screen. A lot of the stuff that Dasha actually came up with, they now still use. Surprisingly enough, a lot of the cool ideas that we came up with are still in use. So Dasha was doing that, but I wanted to do something different, and I wanted something to show that I was a fan.
Yeah.
So I come up with a game called, it was going to be a Name That Tune, and it was going to be based on wrestler entrance music. Because I knew all the wrestlers' entrance music from like, I'm one of those people that could name it in 3 bars. Like, I know right away who the heck his entrance music plays. Just like AJ Lee in that regard.
Nice.
But there's a lot of people, a lot of channels I have to go through to do that. There's a guy, Berkeley Ottman. Berkeley is Fred Ottman, who's Tugboat's son, who works for the company, is now the timekeeper on Raw and SmackDown and basically everything. He was the timekeeper and production manager at our NXT live events in Florida. So I never thought I had any issues with Berkeley, but apparently I did because I was tasked to put this thing together, which I did, and I put a whole report or production plan or whatever. And I submitted it to Greg. Greg said, "Oh, that's great, whatever." And submitted it to other folks, and I was like, "Hey, that's a great idea. Let's try that out." So he sends me an email saying, "Hey, can you try to do it? I want to do it this weekend so that we can go over it next week." So I go to Berkeley about this, like, "Hey, can we? Hamilton wants me to do this week."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I need to get approval to use some of these entrance themes from Kevin Dunn and from these other people."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I'll let Greg know." And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'll let Greg know too, whatever." So then I get this email. I don't even think I read the full email because I knew what it said. It was like this whole email coming down on me that I'm not working hard enough, that I'm lazy, that I asked you to put this plan in place for weeks ago. I'm like, dude, I'm only going through the channels that I'm allowed to go through. I have to go through this process. And Berkeley's telling me that he needs to get approval for these things.
Kind of like going through the chain of command.
The chain of command, yeah. So I go to Berkeley the next day. I'm like, no, I go to Berkeley. I was there with Berkeley. In fact, I got the email while I was at a live event. I said, "Berkeley, can you read this?" And he was like, "Okay." It's like, "Can you put something together?" I was like, "I don't know." So the next day, the next live event, because we did Thursday, Friday, Saturday live events. So I think we started doing it that weekend. We actually he's like, "I can use what's on the computer now. So just give me a list of an order." So basically I gave him a list of play them in this order.
Yeah.
Because then I'll have them on a sheet so that I can say, "Yes, you're correct," or "Yes, you're incorrect," whatever, just in case there was a funky one in there. But I went through his sound board. He's got a little sound program that plays all the music. And I looked and see what he had and what he didn't have. So then I made a list or whatever, and the game, and it went well, and I got great reviews on it from Cole. I got great reviews on it from Greg. I got great reviews on it from basically everybody else. But because of that email, it was kind of like this, it became a bigger thing than it needed to be.
Yeah.
Because I was not working hard enough and all this stuff. And all that stuff ends up, both of those guys send reports to Cole. And when all the reports that you're getting are negative reviews from those two people, because the coaches aren't sending reports in on me, because I'm not their responsibility. But I work with them every day. In fact, they ask me to do a lot of tasks around the Performance Center, helping out with promo class. Or there was even a time where it was right around the time where we started doing those split tours where we'd still have a Florida loop while, the big talent was on the bigger shows, the touring loop.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to kind of survey the fans kind of to see what they were thinking and how they were feeling about, the split tours. So I would literally, on shows that I was not ring announcing, I would go and I would meet with the fans and I would just hang out with them and say, "Hey, so what do you think of the show so far?" or whatever. And I would put these like long, like 5-page reports and send them to the coaches because they asked me to do it. They asked me to just get feedback. I put together these reports on my own, and they're like, "Oh man, I can't believe all the work you put in. Thank you so much. Whatever." So that's why I always got great feedback because I always went above and beyond. But the companies and Cole's like version of events of how I was working there was that I was lazy and I wasn't doing enough. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I was just trying to go through business the way I was told, which was mind your place, take your time, wait till you're told, speak when you're spoken to. Like, I'll give you another example. Like, Terry, I was told very early on, do not give feedback on promos or matches or any of that stuff, or do not give ideas. You're still young. You're still you're still learning this the whole thing works. Even though I've been in the wrestling business for 10 years at this point, it's like we speak the same language.
Yeah.
And it got to there was a time where Terry asked me my opinion about something, and one of the referees was there too, Sean Bennett, who I love. Sean helped me navigate NXT. He's a phenomenal referee, even better person. And Terry asked me opinion. I was like, Terry, they really don't want me kind of giving opinion. And Sean says, when Terry Taylor asks you to give your opinion on something, you should give it. And it had to do with like the placement of one of the matches. I think it had to do with who should come out first on a particular
matchup,
on a particular match. Because usually it's heel out first unless it's the first match of the night or the first match after intermission. The reasoning being is you want someone to help get the crowd up on those two instances. On the other portions of the card, you want the heel out first, and then you want the babyface come out for that reaction.
Yeah.
You want the babyface to come out with the heel already in the ring.
Yeah.
But there was a certain situation because of the way someone's entrance was. It might have been Mojo's entrance. He wanted my opinion on what I thought. I was like, I don't know if I should tell you. Well, Sean Bennett says, when Terry Taylor asks you for your opinion, he really wants your opinion. So I gave it to him. I didn't get in trouble for that, but that's one of those things where it's like getting two different pieces of information, right? You're told to kind of wait your turn. You're told not to give your input. But then you have people that trust you, like Norman Smiley would always ask me, when I would do interviews in the ring on live events. He would hand me the bullet points, like, what do you think he should say? How should he approach this? I was like, Norman, I don't know, man. He's like, Alex, I'm never going to make you be in trouble for giving your opinion with me. So I give feedback and opinion. They trusted me because they knew I knew the business, And that's why I say there's such a dividing line between my time with the coaches and the talent who respected me from a wrestling perspective and the way I was being perceived from a corporate perspective.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't last the as long as I probably could have or should have last. But it is what it is, man. I got to the point where I'm not disappointed about the experience because I had so many people reach out. Like when Jim Ross and Justin Roberts email you within a day of you being released, like that tells you that one, you had an impact, and two, that they understand your situation and they help me understand, like, look, this has nothing to do with you, the talent. It has everything to do with somebody changing their mind on a given day on what they want. They wanted to go a different direction on what type of live event announcers they wanted. They wanted more females. This is right when, in the time, so, Andrea DeMarco comes in, then Charlie Caruso came in shortly after.
Yeah.
And then Kathy Kelly came in. Kathy Kelly had already come in at that point. And she was going to be used mostly in Stanford, but they were going to use her for NXT too, and eventually they started using her for NXT. And then who else came in? And then Kayla Braxton came in. So
Yes.
they wanted more females for all of these roles.
Right.
And that was clear. And they got rid of once they hired Ronaldo, they didn't need Rich anymore. They had the announcer for the marks. They had someone that had that pro wrestling style announcing for SmackDown, which is the style they were going for once it was on USA Live. So it was one of those things where the system changed. It had nothing to do with how good of an announcer Rich was, or how good of an announcer I was, or how good of a TV talent Arto Cal was. It had everything to do with someone who's a decision maker changed their mind about what they wanted. As simple as that.
And of course, after your time with WWE, of course, it wasn't like you just went away. You continued to stay active. May have not been always in the wrestling world, but it was still in the world of CBS and sports, including also with our Channel 4 News here. You also, during your time after WWE, you were able to set up where you did a satellite interview for Ring of Honor with Cody and Dalton Castle to promote for Ring of Honor's version of WrestleMania Final Battle for their upcoming, at the time, their upcoming title matchup. How did that come about? Like, who approached you on that?
Well, Channel 4 is owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group, which is also owns Ring of Honor. So they made that that whole thing kind of available to us. It's like, hey, we have these TV windows available. We can just route the satellite in the back. The same way that we would tune in any type of network programming, they just tune the satellite to that interaction, and then they put an IFB in my ear and an IFB in their ear, and it's basically like a phone call, so they can hear what I'm saying, whatever. But yeah, that was just simply that we were owned by the same company, and it was just a way for us to help promote them. And then we did that. We put that on. We didn't air it. We put it on our Facebook page for Channel 4, and I put it on my Twitter and personal page as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. At the same time, though, was there ever at that point after that interview had aired? Were you ever in talks with Ring of Honor, or was there thoughts about possibly going to Ring of Honor?
So Riccaboni and I are I wouldn't say we're tight, but we're friends on Twitter. I've reached out to him a couple times about like, hey, what's the situation there, type of thing. And this was right around the time when Kevin Kelly was still there.
Yeah.
When we became friends, and it was just never, there was never a fit. They kind of were locked in at both the ring announcer and commentary positions at the time, and Ian is a guy that kind of like made that job happen for himself. He started like going to shows on his own. He developed a racial relationship with the folks in the back. He started doing the Women of Honor stuff. So when it became time for Kevin to kind of leave the company, like he was the natural guy to kind of step in. And there was never, again, it's still to this point, there's never really been kind of a spot for me there. We've talked, but it's never been, it would always have been a part-time thing for me. And I always, I've got to take care of bills and all that stuff. Yeah. So I was always trying to figure out, I got to find a way to get back into wrestling that makes sense for me career-wise. But I would love any opportunity, whether it's Ring of Honor or MLW or AEW, whatever's available out there. Like, I still love the pro wrestling business, and I still think I have a lot to offer from both a commentary perspective and a ring announcing perspective, or a backstage interviews or a production perspective. Like, I've been involved in so many high-profile companies and companies that are really well produced and are top flight sports and entertainment brands that I can, my experience, I can bring a lot of value to really any company. So, we'll kind of wait and see how things happen like in the next few years. But
and you also gone to a couple of AEW shows.
Yes.
What's your experience going to AEW? Like how I guess the crowd is at an AEW show as opposed to WWE, and have you also had any talks with All Elite Wrestling? Because you said that you've had. I guess you could say friendship or maybe an association with Cody Rhodes, going back to the WWE days.
Yeah, we worked together. I think more of the association of friendship is with Jim Ross. Jim actually, he didn't really know me from Adam when we first talked. We have mutual friends in the radio business. A guy I worked with in Houston, Sean Pendergast, and him are really good friends. They go to like OU, Texas together every year. But they've known each other for a long time because they have a mutual friend in Houston. Yeah. Because of his association with OU. But we've kind of been in touch with each other via email and things like that for a few years now. And then Jim actually booked me for a show in Oklahoma called Oklahomania. Yeah. About a few months after I had gotten released, and it was to do commentary for that show. Justin Roberts was actually the ring announcer on that show. And that was a time for me to kind of connect with Justin a little bit, and connect with Jim Cornette, and a bunch of other guys that I had either known or just known in passing, kind of through the wrestling business. And then when AEW was around, they booked these 2 Texas shows, or these 3 Texas shows now at this point. I reached out to Jim and I said, hey, is there an opportunity to kind of be around, sit under the learning tree for you and Tony? Because Tony and I are Facebook friends too, Tony Schiavone. And just kind of like sit and learn and see how things are different kind of over there. And he put me in touch. He put me in touch with some of the other guys there in the company, and they like, I wouldn't say rolled out the red carpet, but they did everything in their power to help me as much as possible. Like they got me a parking pass, they got me like a VIP badge to go to the backstage. Like he's like, you're welcome here. You're part of our family. And I was so grateful to Raphael Morphy, who's head of production there, and Jim, obviously, and Tony Schiavone, who's been very kind to me, let me sit with him while he was prepping for a show. Dasha, who I get to run into, and Dasha and I were always very friendly when we were at WWE. But yeah, like there have been cool experiences kind of going backstage there, and I will say, from a crowd perspective, that's however people want to interpret that. Like they're 2 different types of shows. I think they're trying to get 2 different types of reactions, to be honest.
Kind of like, I guess, between, like, say, rock and roll and country.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different crowd. You know, it's a smaller venue. It's a little bit more adult, I think, or AEW than as opposed to WWE.
Yeah.
But I will say that the backstage environment is night and day in terms of, like, there's just a lot of positivity. There's a lot of it feels a lot more welcoming. You feel less like a outsider. And I'm not saying it was like all doom and gloom at WWE backstage.
Yeah,
it certainly wasn't like that at all. But I will say, like, there's a lot of people backstage at WWE that just kind of like are trying to either hide and not be seen so that they're not on the next chopping block. And there's other people that are kind of upset with their spot. There's folks that are kind of worried. There's writers you can tell that are frustrated because Vince changed the script for the 7th time. Like, there's just a lot more tension, I guess. And you just don't get that at AEW. They don't have scripts. They have run sheets and bullet points. Their talents don't have scripts for their promos. It's a chance for people to be creative, and it's a chance for people to be wrestlers and how they learned how to be wrestlers, you know. And there's, certainly room for growth, I think, there. I think a lot of guys are even learning how to do that because they've never done it that way. A lot of guys don't practice promos and things like that as they're coming up through the wrestling business. But you can see how much more authentic it feels and less plastic that WWE feels sometimes.
It's kind of like whenever I hear a Cody promo, you just feel it, that it's coming, just like how Dusty would do his promos. Like, my favorite promos to this day are Dusty's Hard Times promo from back in the 80s. And this is, of course, when I was a baby, but yet when I rediscovered it, it was like, it made you feel it. And Cody's promo that he had, well, 2 of them. One, the one that was him and Dustin to promote Double or Nothing, about killing the Attitude Era, and then the other from going from being undesirable to undeniable when he was promoting his feud with Jericho. It feels so organic, as opposed to whenever you hear a promo. And I'm not going to mention anyone from WWE's name, but sometimes you feel it. Other times you just feel like, okay, it just happened and I don't feel anything.
Right.
And of course, the popular AEW question that I'll ask you, of course, is, do you see AEW and New Japan finally getting together to do business, or do you feel that's still going to be, at arm's length?
Well, I don't know who we're going to see doing business with each other right now. I think we're in a situation where I think we're still in uncharted territory, to be honest. And I'm being serious when I say this because I think the way travel is being handled right now, I think, and I don't want to get into a political tangent here, but we don't know how much more deep this coronavirus thing is going to affect business, and we don't know what the status of WrestleMania is at this point on those things. We don't know what the status of AEW TV tapings are going to be after this next couple of weeks. There's some that are going to be postponed. There's some that have been canceled by the venues.
Relocated.
Relocated. There's still a lot of uncertainty. As far as the question about New Japan, I would have to think that there's a possibility. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you always see these flirtations between New Japan and the American companies. throughout history, for the last 20, 30 years, there's been some business relationship with any or all of the companies that have come about. Even when WWE would send their guys to Japan, when Hulk Hogan or Hacksaw Jim Duggan would wrestle in the Tokyo Dome,
Yeah.
So I think it's a good fit because I think it's obvious that AEW is trying to keep their talent roster low, and it allows them to kind of cycle in new talent for stages of time, as opposed to having a guy on the roster, having him for a feud or a run for about a year, and then just kind of having nothing for them. Because that's kind of how the wrestling business works now, and why it's different than what it was in the 70s and the early 80s, and that you could go from one territory, work your feud, whatever, do that for 4 or 5 months, and then all of a sudden you lose, and then you go down to Memphis, and then you start something there, or you go up to Minneapolis and start. Now everything's nationwide, so we see you every week. So it's tough when you've got people that you're paying, and you're not running live events, and you're only running basically dark, and dark's pretty much their opportunity to kind of like showcase local and new talent.
Yeah.
So.
Christy Jane, who we saw on the Austin show not too long ago.
Yeah. So they have to be careful not to overspend. So I think good relationships with whether it's AAA, whether it's New Japan, or whoever, will help them in the long run kind of cycle through talent, new talent that we can see and showcase.
And if the opportunity came, if WWE was to come knocking at your door tomorrow,
that won't happen. But go ahead.
But if it did happen hypothetically, what would your response be?
Man, a lot of people have asked me that question, and
if they don't do it, it's their loss.
Rich is even. We have had this conversation a number of times before, because I still think Rich should put a phone call into Cole, because I think they could use him right now. But I would say, look, I was on a 1-year deal that I didn't even get fulfilled. So if I got the opportunity to go, I certainly. If it was required to move to Orlando again, then I would want a multi-year deal with some sort of guarantee of at least the first or second year. The fact that I was released and still had 4 months left on my deal, or 3 months or whatever it was, that kind of hurt for a little bit, because I had to move myself back to Texas, because there was nothing in Orlando for me. There's nothing in Florida for me. So I would need some sort of guarantee for that. But in terms of working for them again, absolutely, man. I think it's a. I've always said it could be the best place to work. It just so happens it's not always a great place to work, because of some of the culture things that exist there, and some of it is bad wrestling culture stuff. Some of it's bad TV production culture stuff. And some of it is just they hire mean, jerky people. But there's mean, jerky people everywhere. Yeah. But when you let them make the decisions and create the infrastructure for your company, that's when it gets tough. If Hunter was running the company, and I didn't have any bad relationship with Vince. I passed by Vince once in my entire time there. But I had a great relationship with Hunter. I had a great relationship with William Regal. And like I said, a great relationship with Adam Pearce, who's now on the road as a producer. There's a lot of people there that are in upper levels that I have a great relationship. Jeremy Borash is there now. He and I have been friendly on social media for a long time. You didn't ask me about Impact, but we had actually talked about me coming into Impact for a stretch there. But this was kind of before it was either before the Anthem buy or right after the Anthem buy of the company. Because they were looking because remember Borash was doing that whole angle with
Broken Matt and Brother Nero.
Well, I can't remember his name. Matthews.
Oh, Josh Matthews.
Yes. Right? And they were kind of cycling through ring announcers. Christy Hemme was kind of near the end of her run there.
Yeah. I think they brought in Dave Penzer from
They brought in Penzer for a little bit, but Penzer wasn't going to be available for every date. So there was a lot of thought about what I could go there to help them do. And that was actually the second time I almost ended up with Impact. There was another time because Jeff Jarrett and I met because he was at a Globetrotter show that I was announcing, and we met and we exchanged numbers, and We chatted for a little bit because they were trying to figure out how to be.
And this was during the TNA era.
This was during the TNA era. Yeah. I think they were. I think they were already Impact at the time.
Oh, okay.
But it was after. It was definitely after all the Hogan stuff. I think.
Yeah.
Like this would have been 2012 ish, 2012, 2013. And we got to talking, and there was a time where like I thought I was going to end up there. They were going to fly me in, and then nothing ever happened. They were going to bring me in to be a social media guy, but they also liked the fact that I could announce if I needed to. And then this other time with Borash, we became friendly or whatever. But going back to your original point, there's a lot of people there that I either love or really like and respect. So if it mattered working for them, and I even everyone goes back to that rant on Twitter that I had about Cole. Cole is a great announcer, I think. I think his reins are tugged a lot on the way. Like what he did last night on SmackDown, there's no one else in that company, including Mauro Ranallo, that could have done what Cole did last night in that empty arena setting and working with Hunter in that whole unscripted kind of like craziness that's going on. The only person in that company that's would have been equipped to do that is Michael Cole. Does Cole have a temper? Yes. Did I feel it sometimes? Yes, once or twice. Did I feel the trickle down of Cole's temper? A lot from Phillips. Would I want to work on the same show as Tom Phillips? Probably not. But would I enjoy working for that company again? Yeah, I think I could. I think I would enjoy it, especially if they had me move to Florida and all I did was NXT. If I went to that company tomorrow, if they called me tomorrow and said, hey, we want you to come in and we want you to work for Borash down in NXT, you'll ring announce on Florida live events and you'll help with production and promo class, done. I'm there. I'd take that job in a heartbeat. Because I love wrestling. I'm not in this business to be a star, if that makes any sense.
No, I got you. You're in it because you love it.
Yes.
And this is what you were born and bred for. And hopefully, if WWE decides to bring you back, hey, awesome. If New Japan says, hey, we need another announcer for the English announce team, aside from Kevin Kelly, awesome. Same thing if Ring of Honor, AEW, MLW, or Impact, or anybody else was to bring you in, man, it would be, in my opinion, a plus because it's not only they're gaining a true fan that has a great voice, but also it's a great representation of the Rio Grande Valley when it comes to wrestling fans. Yeah. And also just wanted to say thank you, of course, for not only the interview time, but also thank you for representing the Valley during your time with WWE and wherever you end up next. Because I know you got a full plate doing basketball and other sports for CBS. Mm-hmm. Whatever wrestling company gets you, hey man, that's a big plus for them.
Hey, I'm certainly available. I'm taking bookings any single time at Alex Del Barrio on Twitter, man. I could certainly use them right now with sports being shut down for the next 4 months. But thanks for having me, man. It means a lot to me to see the wrestling scene in the Rio Grande Valley kind of grow and continue to grow. Because one of the things that kind of sucked for me about my time at WWE is like a lot of my friends and family never got to see me like ring announce or be on the road. You know, they saw me if they had the WWE Network, you know, and it was cool to see some of my friends, my high school friends, actually come to Access and see me work. But
during WrestleMania
32. But the fact that I never got to do a live event in Hidalgo or Edinburgh, it kind of sucks for me. And that's an experience that I wish I could have had. If there's anything on that time that I was there that I wish I could have gotten, it would have been the chance to do a live event in Texas, whether it was an NXT roadshow in Houston, San Antonio or something, or a WWE live event in like Hidalgo or whatever. That was the one thing I didn't get to do that I would have loved the opportunity to do. But you know, there's a lot more wrestling happening.
There's Texas Wrestling League here in McAllen.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff kind of going on in the state. I think the amount of wrestling available to fans in the South Texas from LWA to TWL to the Wrestling Revolution guys to the folks over at Inspire in Austin to the River City guys.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
and then of course also Puro Pinche Wrestling, which is opening up next Saturday.
Puro Pinche Wrestling, Heavy Metal Wrestling in San Antonio, who my cousin actually is the production manager for. There's just so much, and it's so much more talent than there's ever been. And again, I'm totally open to coming by for shows and stuff like that. Just let me know ahead of time that you got a show coming up and put it in the calendar. And I'd be happy to come. I'd be happy to. One thing I love doing is working with talent on promos, working with talent or breaking down matches for them, etc.
Yes, sir.
So please reach out. I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open.
Hashtag book Alex Del Barrio.
Hashtag book Alex Del Barrio, book ADB. But like again, if anyone out there has questions about how to get there, how does one get their video seen, how does one put a video together to get signed, I'm available for those questions. I'm gonna love to answer them, because if I can help another, Victoria Gonzalez get signed, or someone from the Valley or South Texas, help them at least get their stuff looked at, I'd be more than happy to help them out with that.
Definitely, man. Well, Alex, we do thank you for your time, of course. We do thank all our viewers who tuned in today on Armbar, of course, with our special guests, Alex Del Barrio. And Alex, I was saying to a lot of friends, but to me, this was, I've interviewed my share of wrestlers, but to me, this was the biggest interview that I've had the chance to do, and it's with someone that represented the RGV and still does. They got to make it to the big time at WWE, and hopefully, like I said, we see you back there again down the road, or with any other company. And the good thing is now the options are wide now,
Yeah.
as opposed to 10 years ago when all you had was WWE
Exactly.
and TNA. Now it's like, well, there's AEW, there's Ring of Honor. But the thing is, of course, I'm just happy that you graced us with your presence and with your knowledge.
I know. As I told Mike earlier, I'm just a guy, man. I'm just a guy who was a kid from the Valley that got a chance to live his dream. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to do this with you guys again anytime. Especially if you want to go down a different lane and talk about current stuff or whatever. If I'm in town and I'm available, I'd be happy to come by the studios anytime.
The Armbar doors are always open to you, sir.
Awesome, man.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, brother.
And of course, today we thank you all for joining in today on Armbar. For The Biz, Mike Balsadua. For Alex Del Barrio, I am the Rockstar, J. Ochoa, and we're signing out. Stay classy.